Hey, what's going on, Noah Nation? It's CJ Wilson here with Dope Talk. We got a special episode as this is Clemson week, big time ACC game. Usually, this game here pretty much, well, in the past, it'll determine who goes for the ACC championship with the Coastal and Atlantic. The divisions are going now, but nonetheless, there still is a huge ACC game, especially for FSU, as we haven't been Clemson since 2014. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our Behind Enemy Lines segment. And here we have Will Vandervort, senior writer for Clemson Insider. Will, how's it going?
I'm doing good, CJ. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, man. It's really great to have you on.
Man, thanks for having me, as always.
Yeah, so like I was saying, it's FSU versus Clemson. This is one of the biggest games in the ACC. Well, pretty much in my opinion, this is the premier game in the ACC. A
Mhm.
lot of implications within this game, and almost definitely 100%. Let's jump into it. This is a game I've had circled since the schedule has dropped. The FSU Clemson game. FSU hasn't beaten Clemson since 2014. Like you said, Clemson went on that dominant run of winning ACC titles and competing for national championships. Let's just talk about the Tigers for this 2023 season. A
Mhm.
rough start to the season, a rough half to the season in regards to the Charleston Southern game, and then things started to click within the second half, and then rolled over to FAU. So,
Mhm.
so let's just talk about Clemson so far, Will, and what's your thoughts on the 2023 Clemson team?
Yeah, I think they're starting to find themselves a little bit right now. To be honest with you, that Duke game, I don't think they were ready for what they were walking into with Duke. Duke's a very physical football team. They're a good football team. They got a good quarterback. Brought back 18 starters. They heard how good Duke was and how Duke could be, but it's still Duke, right? That's what you think to yourself. And when you're Clemson, you just show up and you should beat Duke. That's the way it's always been and should be, to be honest with you. But that wasn't the case this year. Duke really kind of brought the wood, if you will, and they were dominant. I thought especially in the first half, I thought Clemson found themselves a little bit there in the second half and were controlling the game, but they just couldn't turn. They just kept turning the football over. I mean, what was it? Three straight consecutive drives where they get inside the 5 yard line and don't score. I mean, first and goal at the one twice, and didn't score. There's one play where Cabe Klubnik, quarterback, he pulls out and it's wide open. He's going to score on an RPO play. He's wide open. He's going to run it in for a touchdown standing up. He trips over his feet, falls down around the 11 or 12 yard line. It's like, what in the world's going on? A couple plays later, a field goal's blocked. I mean, it was just that kind of night, just where nothing went right for him. But they kind of got their sea legs back, if you will, against Charleston Southern. A lot of people don't know who didn't watch the game. They see Southern scored 17 points, but guys, Charleston Southern didn't even have 75 yards total offense. What happened was Clemson fumbled the ball on 4th and 1. The guy picks it up and returns it to the 1 yard line. They score on the next play. The very next drive, Clemson's driving down the field. Klubnik makes a horrific mistake trying to throw the ball out of bounds, not even close. It gets intercepted by the guy, and he takes it 67 yards to the house for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 14-7 Charleston Southern. People are like, what is going on here? They had one total yard and had a 14-7 lead. It was the craziest thing I ever seen. It's like back-to-back weeks where we saw these crazy turnovers, and you're like, what is going on with this team? But they settled down. Klubnik after that threw for 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards passing. And then last week, a really solid performance, probably the best they've played all year at this point, where they just kind of came out and dominated from the start, took a 48-0 lead before, a 41-0 lead before, Florida Atlantic got a touchdown, made it 41-7, and then Clemson scored another touchdown with their backups, and then they gave up a give-me-up kind of touchdown with the scrubs on the last drive of the game, made it 48-14. So it wasn't even as close as it wasn't even that good. It was a dominant performance by Clemson on both sides, and so I think they're finding their sea legs. They're kind of getting to who they are, their identity is. I think they're definitely a defensive football team. That's first and foremost. It's an elite defense, even against Duke. Duke didn't move the ball very much on them. Clemson had like 5 or 6 3 and outs, forced a couple turnovers. A lot of people said, well, Clemson didn't any sacks on them. Well, they were doing real quick passes, and if they didn't, their quarterback, he would scramble out and throw the ball out of bounds. He had 9 pressures. Clemson had 9 pressures on him, and he threw the ball away all 9 times. So they did do a lot of good things against Duke. It just came down where the offense just misfired and gave Duke 2 touchdowns off turnovers, and really the game was 28-7, but it was actually Clemson could have easily won that 20-14 and probably should have won it 20-14, to be honest with you. So, but it is what it is. They happen. They lost. Give Duke credit for finding ways to capitalize on Clemson's miscues and finding a way to win the game. And I think that's going to be what this game is about. I really believe, with these two teams, it's if Clemson can play a clean game, it's going to give them a great chance to win it.
Speaking about, you spoke about that egregious pass for Cade, and that's kind of been his mo so far within his career, early in his career. Kind of like the boomer bust with him. He has a gunslinger mentality. He's going to toss the ball around. He's going to take chances, believe in his arm.
Right.
Let's talk about Cade itself and how it's maturation from year one to year two, and just trying to be more of a consistent quarterback and not take those chances that can be costly turnovers for the team.
Yeah, they're trying to get him to understand that he has an elite defense, and he has a defense that can win them most games. And they're trying to get him to understand, if you play within the system and do what we need you to do and don't overthink things, don't force the issue on things, take care of the football, manage the offense, then your defense is going to win you the football game. You just can't put them in bad situations where they're getting short fields or stuff like they like sapping the first couple of weeks, right? Last week there was the offense. Clemson had one turnover, but that was a muff punt, so that wasn't on the offense. And so they had a very clean game on offense. He had probably his best game. Period. I know the stats don't show that 16 of 25, I think, or something like that for 215 yards, 3 touchdowns. He also ran for a touchdown. So the stats don't say, "Oh my goodness, he killed it." But when you watch the tape and you see he's comfortable in the pocket, he didn't throw really anything off his back foot and making bad passes. He was trusting his offensive line. He was going through his progressions. He was playing well in the run game, and so he did all those things right, and it was a good boost of confidence game for him. I think things finally slowed down for him, and I think that's what it was going on in the first couple of weeks, the Tennessee game, and then the first couple of weeks of the season. Just everything was happening so fast, and you saw him backing up and throwing off his back foot and doing stuff you shouldn't do. And he does have a gunslinger mentality. Dabo's talked about it. Sometimes you're going to have to live with his mistakes because he's going to make a ton of great plays to go with the one bad play. So you kind of got to live with it at times. Sort of like Dabo's compared it to Deshaun Watson. Deshaun is that way. He's going to make a lot of great plays, but he's also going to do some plays that you're going to be scratching your head, what are you doing? Throw the ball away or something. But he's trying to make plays, and sometimes you just got to let a player do that. You can't take that away from that element, or you take the player away. And so I think they're going to try to live with some of those. They just hope he doesn't do it. And what they're trying to get him to understand is don't do it in the inopportune times. Don't put your defense in a situation where, for instance, on Saturday where Florida State's got to go a short field to score, because with this offense, you're giving Jordan Travis and that ball at the 50-yard line, I guarantee you they're scoring probably 95% of the time.
Yeah, I agree. They've been pretty efficient on offense with all the weapons. And Clemson made some changes as well. So as you know, throughout that playoff run and things like that, the coordinators were real consistent, right? You knew you had an offensive coordinator, you knew you had a defensive coordinator. Now you're going into year two of Goodwin's defense and also the first year of Riley's offense. What's your opinions on the coordinator so far, and also just I guess the difference in scheme schematically from one defense? Well, I'm not necessarily say difference in scheme schematically because Goodwin, excuse me, he was pretty much under the previous regime, Venables defense for the most part. But then you have Riley, who's coming over, was kind of totally different from what was done previously. So let's talk about the new coordinators at Clemson.
Yeah, I'll start off with the defensive side because that's kind of my thing. I think that's why me and D-Mac get along so well. We're both defensive guys. I also played safety. I just didn't play as well as he did. When I look at Wes has changed a little bit of what I think he learned a lot from his first year. He's being more aggressive, I think, with how he uses his linebackers. Where last year he played a lot of zone. Which was interesting. Maybe it was because he didn't trust his corners as much. I don't know. But this year they're not playing as much zone. They're playing a lot of man. They're coming up and they're being aggressive on the receivers. He does play a lot of zone blitzes, though. Just like you saw with Venables, he's going to come with a lot of exotic stuff, tries to confuse the quarterback in as many ways as he can. I think when you look at what he did to Riley Leonard over at Duke. I think Riley Leonard was 17 of 34 or something like that for 100-something yards. He did a great job on confusing him. I mean, he took looks away. They weren't giving him anything deep. Duke was thinking they could do a little bit more in the passing game than they were able to do. And I think West called a great game in that game and gave Clemson a chance to win it with their defense. I think he's learned a lot. And then when you look at the last two games, they've just been dominant the last two games, and as they should when you're playing lesser competition. But I mean, they're not letting the guys breathe. I mean, they're all over the quarterback last week. Knocked one quarterback out, unfortunately, towards ACL. That's unfortunate. But they were resilient. I mean, they were just three or four guys every time he dropped back to pass or back there in the backfield, and they not only got 2 sacks, but they pressured them a bunch and hit them a bunch. And so that's what they're going to try to do this week, obviously, because you got to disturb the quarterback if you're going to have any chance of winning against anybody. We know that. And I think he's done a better job bringing the pressures and giving the different looks. I think he's more comfortable now calling plays, and so far so good there. Offensively, Garrett Riley, I think he's starting to settle in on what his personnel is and understanding who he can count on, who he can't. I think the emergence of a guy like Tyler Brown at wide receiver is giving Clemson that big play ability that they've been missing the last couple of years at wide receiver. You saw the couple weeks before, with Bo Collins making some big plays using his ability to break tackles and run, and showed off his speed he had one 99-yard touchdown where he barely stepped out of bounds, or it would have been a 99-yard touchdown. I mean, it was unbelievable play that he made. And then he ended up getting a 67-yarder later in the game, catch and run. So they're showing some ability, because early in the season people were double teaming Antonio Williams, who was their leading pass catcher last year and all. And now you're starting to see with these other guys emerging, okay, well, we can't really double up this kid anymore. We're going to have to start trying to do some different things, and that's freeing up Antonio, who had a big game last week as well, a couple of touchdown grabs. And so I think you're starting to see different guys at wide receiver make plays, and I think that's the way Riley's starting to trust them, and he's trusting his quarterback a little bit more. And then but the strength of this team is the run game. That's what they're going to do. They want to run the ball first. Will Shipley, Phil Maffa, that offensive line, it's a veteran offensive line. It's an offensive line that ran the ball well last year. People don't know that, but Clemson ran the ball well when they wanted to run it. They were so bent on making DJ, try to throw the ball at times. You just scratched your head and you're like, why? Why are you doing that? Just run it. Give it to Will Shipley, give it to Phil Maffa. Garrett Riley's more or less to the tune of, we're going to run the ball. That's what we're doing, and we're doing it well. We're going to keep doing it. And, so you saw that in the Duke game where they had, I think Shipley had 115 yards rushing, and Maffa, I think, had 80-something yards rushing. And they like that balance, and they're going to try to do both again. You saw that in the second game as well, and the third game. So, so I think he's doing well as far as the way he's, he came out last week. I don't know if you saw him in the bunch sets, played a lot of 20 personnel. Yeah. For those who don't know what that means they're playing 2 running backs, no tight ends. First time I've seen that at Clemson ever. No tight ends on the field, at least in the Dabo Swinney era, I should say. And, so that's different. That's a different look. And they did a lot of things last week to just, I think, to put it on film so Florida State will have to prepare for it. They ran a lot of formations, but probably ran the same play out of the formations, which is a headache for a defensive coordinator, because you're like, okay, what are they going to do with this? We got to be prepared, but we don't know what they're going to do with it. So he's pretty crafty, and it's going to be an interesting matchup watching him against that Florida State defense this week.
Yeah, most definitely. You spoke on Will Shipley in the run game, and that's pretty much been FSU's Achilles heel the last couple of years. Is Will Shipley, big time running back, has been making a lot of plays for Clemson. The receivers, like you said, I want to speak on the receivers just a little bit more, because in the past, Clemson had receivers that you had to fear on the outside. Nuke,
Sammy
Higgins, Sammy, Mike Williams. The names, the list goes
Jordan
on.
Leggett.
Leggett, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, you have your shifty guys in the slot as well. Mm-hmm. So just speak about the Clemson receiver room, because, like you said, it's been more so of a run-heavy offense. Antonio Williams is very explosive, but a lot of star power as far as a recruiting trail, but just not a lot of production so far.
Yeah, so Bo Collins, if you remember a couple of years ago, he started off really well as a freshman, and then he got injured. And really he struggled the last couple of years to really get to 100%. and you just didn't see it from him. You saw glimpses here and there. He started off last year actually, had 5 touchdowns in the first 5 games and was doing well, but then got hurt again, and kind of faltered back. And it is what it is. So they know that big play kind of mentality is there with him. They saw it when he was a freshman. Now they're starting to see glimpses of it again here as a senior, and he's sort of the alpha guy in there. Is he a Nuke Hopkins or Sammy Watkins or Mike Williams? No, not even close. But he does bring that experience, and he is a guy that I think you at least got to pay attention to now on the outside. If he's healthy, that's going to help a little bit, but you're not fearing him. But the problem's been they've just missed on some guys the last several years. Guys they thought were going to be big-time players. Joseph Ngata never really worked out. He was a 4-star guy. E.J. Williams, another 4-star guy, didn't work out. He transferred out. Frank Ladson, another guy that was a 4-star, just didn't work out. He's down at Miami, I believe now. Yep. And so they just didn't hit for some reason. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's coaching because, they had a coaching change there. Maybe it was just the player wasn't as they evaluated the player wrong. I don't know. But it didn't work out. But I like what they've done. Obviously, they hit with Antonio Williams last year, came in and really provided a spark and gave them that slot receiver that they haven't had in a long time. And then I think this year they've hit with Tyler Brown, the freshman. He also is a slot guy. So they feel like now having him, they can maybe get both those guys out there. And then this guy named Troy Stellato, who was a 5-star guy about 3 years ago that tore his ACL his freshman year, so didn't play. Then last year had a severe injury with his hamstring and all, didn't play all year. Comes into this season, had a great summer, getting ready for camp, tears his hamstring again.
Oh man!
And it's like this kid, man, everybody's like, oh my gosh, this kid's just having the worst luck, And Dabo's like, they see it, they know how talented this kid is. I mean, he's super fast. He's probably the fastest guy in the field. And so they got him healthy right before the season started against Duke. Didn't play him against Duke. They held him because they wanted to just make sure he's back 100%. Played him in week 2, and you started to see it, the glimpses, and he played again last week. He's a guy they're really excited about, and they think, okay, now we got 3 difference makers on this field to go with our alpha dog and Bo Collins. And they feel like, okay, we got a set of receivers who can make some plays and can put some stress on a defense where the defense just isn't stacking the box and trying to just shut down Will Shipley and Phil Maffa.
Let's speak about the offensive line a little bit. How do you think the Clemson offensive line will fare against Florida State's defensive line?
Well, the interesting matchup is I like Clemson in the middle. As you just mentioned, Clemson's had a lot of success running the ball, especially up the middle on them. That's where Clemson's strength is on this offensive line. Where they have a veteran center back, they have a veteran left guard and Marcus Tate back, and they have a veteran right guard in Walker Parks, who, by the way, is questionable for this game. So it's something to keep an eye on. Dabo says he's probably going to be a game-time decision whether he's going to play or not. So look about 90 minutes before kickoff when that availability list comes out at Clemson. That's something to pay attention to. Walker Parks is an all-ACC guy. But, if he plays, they feel real good about their ability to run up the middle. Because they want to stay away from the edges. Let's just call it like it is. Florida State's defensive ends are legit. I mean, they are the 2 best defensive ends probably in the ACC as a collective group, and they could get after the quarterback. They can make plays in the run game. You can't really go wide on them. So it's one of those things where you got to be able to try to attack them up the middle and have success up the middle against them. So the offensive line is going to be a challenge for them because when you think they got a sophomore and Blake Miller out at right tackle, and then they got a redshirt sophomore sitting out there in Tristan Lee in Colin Sadler as a redshirt freshman. Those are their options going against those defensive ends. So as you could tell, it's going to be get the ball out of Klubnik's hands fast or do it up the middle or maybe roll him out. Don't let him have to sit in the pocket with those 2 guys breathing down his neck, because I think Florida State definitely wins that battle on the edges. So Clemson's got to try to win that battle in the middle of the field.
Really good point. Really good point. You spoke about an injury. Let's quick question: is Andrew, if I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, please forgive me. Bukumba, is he playing?
Andrew Makuba going to be
Bukumba.
yeah, he's the nickelback safety. He's going to be a game time decision. Also, Dabo said tonight. So you got two guys there that are game time decisions. So we'll see what happens there. Everybody else is healthy, going to play. It's just those two guys that I mentioned as game time decisions. So if he doesn't play, though, they feel good. They got Khalil Barnes. He started the last two games, and he's a true freshman. And dude, you know who he reminds me of?
Oh yeah, huh? That's a good guy. If you remind me of him,
He
then he's a
reminds me
baller
of
player.
DeAndre McDaniels, who he reminds me of. He's a playmaker and he makes plays. He's got a ton of energy. Had an interception last week. I mean, he brings it every play. I love watching this kid play. It really does remind me of DMAC, and so I'm sure DMAC's coached him up. To be honest with you,
Yeah.
really excited about him. So they feel real good because then the guy behind them is a guy by the name of Avion Terrell. You probably heard of his brother AJ,
AJ.
who played at Clemson, was an All-American, and now plays All-Pro for the Falcons. He's man, he came. This is what he did. He came in this past summer. He didn't play. He wasn't here for the spring, so he came in the summer, and he goes to Coach Reed and he says, "Coach Reed, I don't care how it is, man. I want to get on the field. I don't care if I got to play nickel. I don't care if you want me at safety. I want to play. Tell me what I need to do to learn so I can get on the field." And so they put him at nickel back. He plays corner and nickel, and he's the backup nickel right now. And him and Khalil probably playing, about 35, 40 snaps, and they're dividing between the two. And so they're really giving them a nice 1-2 punch there, even with Andrew Makuba out. They're really deep in the secondary. They got star players everywhere. I think and they're just all these guys. They've hit on almost all of them, and that's the thing that makes them so good in the secondary. So that's going to be a fun matchup.
Yeah, I
Florida
was going to
State's
ask you
wide
about that next,
receivers
the
against
receivers and the
Clemson's
DBs.
receivers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was my next question. So, what's your opinion on that and how that matchup go? I know Nate Wiggins is a big time player. I was talking to Dre, and speaking to AJ, he thinks AJ is one of the. He speaking to him, he said AJ is probably the best corner he's seen to come through Clemson during his time player as coach,
Mm-hmm.
and he also thinks that Nate is going to be on that level as well. So let's talk about that matchup in regards to the the FSU receivers who are big time playmakers in their own right versus the Clemson secondary.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun matchup because Clemson is big in the secondary. Clemson matches up well, probably better with Florida State than Florida State's going to have anybody else they play this year in the secondary. Because now, granted, they don't have anybody 6'7", but
Right,
who
right. That's a
does?
little
But
different,
who
right?
does, right? I don't
Yeah.
think anybody does. But they have some big safeties. Jalen Phillips is a 6'2" guy who can jump, and so he's going to provide a lot of coverage. I think when on Wilson, you're probably going to see Clemson playing a lot of cover 2 back there. Right, with making sure their safeties are getting there. R.J. Mickens, you want to know a guy who's going to be a future All-Pro?
Mm.
This guy, R.J. Mickens, remember that name? This guy he's the real deal at safety. He's a strong safety, so you're going to see him play a lot as well. He's very athletic too. He can get up. He's about 6 foot. Then the corners. We just mentioned Wiggins. What people don't know about him is he's 6'2".
Yeah.
And so, he's a tall corner, and I think Clemson got him for this reason, to play teams like Florida State with these tall, athletic wide receivers. He's a former basketball player himself, can jump out of a gym. And then there's this guy over on the other side named Jaden Lucas. He laid the pop a few weeks ago that led to an interception and return for a touchdown. They're going to use him a lot because he's another tall guy. He's about 6'2" as well. Can really get up. He's athletic, but is also very physical. And then they got the guy named Wade Woodaz, sophomore linebacker, plays at Sam position, but they also play him at safety a lot. And I think in this game you're going to see him, especially in Clemson's dime packages, you're going to see him playing safety. 6'4", fast, very athletic, can get up, can get high up in the air. That's a guy you want against those two big guys back there for Florida State. If you have to go play jump ball stuff, and of course we're probably going to see that. And so it's going to be an interesting matchup because Coleman, I think, surprised he got shut out last week, but that little DB for Boston College, man, that guy's good. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
tell you, I watched that thing, and I'm like, who is this kid? Man, he was all over him. He wasn't
Yeah.
letting him do anything, and so that's more props to him than anything Coleman did. I think it's just that he had a good matchup on him. But man, Coleman's the real deal. We saw that against LSU, and then obviously Wilson, if he hangs onto the ball, He's as good as anybody. I think you throw a ball that's hard to catch, he's going to catch it. Just don't let him throw the easy
The
catches,
easy
right? I
one,
mean,
right?
the easy ones are what he drops. So, but they're very good. And then they got a tight end, former South Carolina player who just lit Clemson up last year. Andrew Makuba still probably having nightmares about it. He's as good as there is, and I know he's a weapon that Clemson. They're not looking forward to having to figure a way to cover him. He's the if there's a guy I say who's going to be the guy that could cause a lot of problems for Clemson, it's going to be him.
Hmm.
He's going to be the guy because I don't know if Clemson has anybody that can match up with him.
Yeah, and I was telling people prior to the season, I think Jaheim Bell's going to be X factor to the offense, just from the simple fact that it's just a matchup nightmare, right? Too quick and too fast for your linebackers, too big and physical for your typical defensive back. Just a,
Yep.
a, a matchup nightmare.
He is, and Clemson knows that firsthand. He ate Clemson alive last year in that game against South Carolina. So, and he's played in the Valley, so he's not going to be intimidated. He won. He ended a 40-game win streak. He was on that team that did it, so he's
Hmm.
not. He's going to bring a lot of that confidence to Florida State, I think. So, it's probably a benefit for Florida State having him on the field with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Then I think that the two best players on your defense, of course, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Barrett Carter, the
Mm-hmm.
linebackers. Just talk about what those
Yeah,
guys bring to the table. They're some playmakers, man.
those are two guys. You want to talk about guys that are going to be playing at the next level, right? They're going to be playing at the next level. They're as good as linebackers you'll find in the country. The first game against Duke, and they didn't play much in this fall camp because Trotter got hurt. I think he had like a hamstring or calf injury. Can't remember which one it was. So he missed most of fall camp. And then we found out Barrett Carter did too, as he was nursing an injury. And so when you watch the Duke game, you could tell that those two guys didn't play that much because they were slow, kind of behind. They were getting busted. They were getting beat on some plays. They were with the running backs on the wheel routes, and you're like, what's going on with these two guys? They just don't look like themselves. They kind of started looking a little bit better the next week against Charleston Southern. And then last week, they were who we thought they were going to be. They were everywhere, man. They were flying to the football. It's basically they needed 3 preseason games, guys, to get ready. I think is
Mhm.
what it was, and because they just didn't play much in fall camp, and I think you see now they've progressed to where we thought they were going to be, and they're now in football shape, if you will, and so that's going to be a fun matchup to watch. What those two linebackers can do, and how Clemson's going to try to use them because you can take Barrett Carter and you can use him in many different ways. You can use him as a Sam. You can use him as a inside backer. You can also put him at safety kind of position. He's that guy that kind of can go everywhere. And then Trotter is your quarterback of the defense and kind of, he's that guy that's in on every tackle. And they both run sideline to sideline so well. And, I'm sure the Florida State fans remember it from last year's game. Those two guys were everywhere. And
Yeah,
that's probably going to be the case on Saturday. The interesting thing I want to match up is the running backs because, as I mentioned, Clemson's had issues with the running backs in coverage this year. Seen a lot of busted plays. Duke had a couple busted plays in that game against Duke that allowed Duke to get a couple early field goals. And then we saw it a couple of plays last week against Florida Atlantic and also against Charleston Southern. So if there's an Achilles heel on this defense, it's the linebackers and busted coverages with the running backs. And guys, and I know Florida
yeah,
State loves to throw those screen passes to them running backs.
yeah. That's a very good point. Because Lawrence Philly is a guy that FSU likes to use out of the backfield a lot. A utility guy, third down type of back, makes a lot of plays in the passing game. So that's definitely going to be something to watch out for. Um, what's the buzz like for this game coming to Clemson? Just from an atmosphere standpoint, as we guys know, Death Valley is one of the most renowned stadiums in college football. What do you think the atmosphere is going to be like in Death Valley for this one?
Yeah, I chuckled around the country just listening to people say, "Oh, they're playing that game at daylight. Oh, that's going to hurt for Clemson. It's going to suck." And I'm like, I don't know. They're like, Clemson doesn't play well in the daytime, and I'm like, they're 42-2 since 2014 in day games. I think they play pretty well in the daytime. What you think? You know,
Damn well, I'll take it.
yeah, right. Anybody would take that. They're it's going to be lit. I mean, yeah, would it be better if it's at night? Of course it would. That's anywhere, right? I mean, but Clemson fans are known, as you know, you've seen
Yeah,
it. They're big time football fans. They're very knowledgeable football fans. They'll be in the stadium early. It's not just because it's a noon game doesn't mean Clemson fans ain't going to show up till right at kickoff. No, they'll be in the stadium around 10 o'clock. in the morning when they open up the gates, and they'll start filing in and want to try to be intimidating as they can to Florida State, and they'll be loud as they always are, and it'll be a great atmosphere. There's no doubt in my mind. I remember the Wake Forest game a few years ago was a noon kick, and Wake Forest had their best team, and they came into Death Valley with what's the Sam Hartman and those guys, and Clemson just blew them out because they just fed off the crowd, and that was a Clemson team that was struggling at the time. They beat them 47-7, and just the crowd was there like at 10 o'clock, and they were loud, and man, and when Wake Forest got in that stadium, they really had no chance, man. It was just they were right on top of them, and just they were causing issues the whole game, and it was a blowout. Like I said, Clemson built like a 47-7 lead before Wake Forest did anything, and so it was an intimidating environment. They had the same way a few years back when they played NC State in a noon game. I always laugh when people say that. I'm like, that doesn't matter at Clemson. You know why they wear the Tiger Paw at 1 o'clock? Because all their games used to be played at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So Clemson fans are kind of used to being there at that time of day. So it doesn't matter to Clemson fans. Yeah, they like to be at night so they can tailgate and drink a little bit more. Sure. But they're just as rowdy and loud and aggravating, as they are in a night game when they get into the stadium.
All right. Well, last question before I get your score prediction. What's your thoughts on Dabo Sweeney's, I guess how can I put this, his take on the portal, his approach to the portal and things like that? That's been a strong topic of conversation in regards to, Clemson things. Because we spoke about the receivers, some of the receivers not really panning out. And in my opinion, I think if Dabo or Clemson was to dabble in the portal, they'll be able to get whoever the hell they want at receiver just from the simple fact of,
who they are.
Yeah, exactly. Who they are and the past success they had at receiver. So what's your takes on Dabo Sweeney and his portal approach or lack of approach?
Yeah, very good point. I think there with the wide receivers. I think that's where the major headache is with Clemson fans. But what I always tell people is I look at Dabo and I think about he treats the transfer portal like free agency.
Mm-hmm.
And so I use the analogy Dabo is the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New England Patriots of college football. In other words, those teams, even with free agency, they build their team through the draft.
Yeah.
They don't ever build it through free agency. Very rarely do you see those two teams go after big-time free agents. Very rarely. And it's worked for them. I mean, you look at the success of those two franchises, right? So when you look at Dabo, he kind of treats the transfer portal the same way. He wants to build his team through recruiting. And it's frustrating for Clemson fans right now, but when you look at next year, you look at this Clemson offense right now, they're going to have 10 starters back next year. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing already the production of these guys right now coming to fruition. And so, yeah, I understand the frustration, and I understand Clemson fans they can get a quick fix with some of these guys, and I understand it. That's just not what Dabo believes. He believes only he wants to do the transfer portal when he absolutely has no choice but to go do it. You're probably going to see him do it this year with linebacker. I will be stunned if he does it because he's going to lose his two linebackers here. He's only got 6 scholarship linebackers right now because of attrition and stuff like that, where guys have transferred out and things of that nature. So, and guy got kicked off a team just before camp started. That all didn't help, right? I mean, that was horrible story. And so now he's probably gonna have to go to the portal there because they need some instant help there. So you might see that there. If I had to pick a situation where he might do it, it might be this coming offseason. But I still won't be surprised if he doesn't because he is bringing in Sammy Brown. He's the 5-star linebacker that everybody's talking about. They're excited about him, but he just doesn't. He just believes that he can build a team still through recruiting. That's his belief point. I get it. Everybody's different, right? Obviously Mike Norvell does it a different way. I kind of like the way Mike Norvell does things with his transfer portal, where he's building. He gets a guy that he knows is going to be here a couple years, not just a 1-year guy. He gets a guy that's okay. You're going to be here for a couple years, sort of the way Brad Brownell does it at Clemson with men's basketball. He kind of builds it the same way. Gets a guy that can come in for a couple years, has that experienced guy there. And he's got him for 2 years or so he can start bringing in some recruits and kind of build up that culture that way. So I understand it. It can work either way, I think. I think we're going to see that on Saturday. It's kind of two different contrasts, but the same result, if you will, in my opinion. And we'll see. That's his take on it. It's just people look at it, he's being stubborn and everything. I just think it's who he is. It's what he believes. He wants to bring a kid in and build him as his own and not have to bring somebody else in that's already been influenced by somebody else, if you will. I kind of get it.
No, I get it in that
Especially as
aspect.
a
And that's
Steelers
a
fan.
good point with the Patriots and the Pittsburgh Steelers. A very good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, as a Steelers fan, I get it. I understand it because I've witnessed it for 20-something plus years. This is how my team's done things. So it can be done. I think both can work. I really do believe it. It's just Dabo's way takes a little longer because
Hmm.
you're building through recruiting.
Right.
It is what it
100%.
is.
All right. Well, let's get to the point where the people have been waiting for and want to hear. What's your score prediction of the game, and how do you feel the game will play out?
Yeah, I don't know if Florida State fans are going to like me after the score prediction, but first of all, I like to do a little backup story. I was one of the reporters that went down there during the COVID year and got told to turn around right when I was almost in the press box that they're not playing a game. So I was a little bitter, still bitter about that because I ended up not getting home till 1 in the morning because I
Oh
had to
man.
stay and figure out what was going on, what happened, the whole story for both sides, right? Had to report on that. Didn't leave Tallahassee till like 6 o'clock that night. And then there's a wreck on I
Oh man.
75.
You
I didn't
got a
get home.
day then.
Yeah, I didn't get home till 1 a.m. I was very bitter to Mike Norvell. So, so I like to throw a little thing about that because I'm always big on, things turn around for a reason or things happen for a reason. Not that that's what has anything to do with my score prediction. I like Clemson's. I heard somebody say last week, Clemson's offense is not on par where Florida State's offense is, and that's correct. I have no argument with that. But it's not Clemson's offense against Florida State's offense. Clemson's defense is very much up to par with Florida State's offense. They really are. And I like that matchup. I think Clemson's going to get their own on defense, and Florida State's going to get their own on offense. I think they cancel each other out. I think this game is won between Clemson's offense, and Florida State's defense. Excuse me.
Hmm.
I like Clemson's matchup up the middle. I watched the LSU game. I watched the Boston College game. Those Florida State was really exploited in the middle of the field in both those games. You know it as well as I do. That's a major weakness for them. Can they get it corrected against Clemson? I don't know. We're going to find out. But I like that matchup for Clemson up the middle. I think they can have a lot of success there. That's going to set up a lot of things for the offense on the outside if they can get those safeties to have to move inside and keep having to move up inside. And that's going to allow maybe those receivers to do something. It comes down to two things for Clemson, I believe, if Clemson's going to win this game. They have to take care of the football. They cannot lose the turnover battle. I agree with Dabo. If they lose the turnover battle, they ain't beat Florida State. Okay? That's one. The second thing is they have to take advantage of every scoring opportunity they get. Can't leave any points on the field. So whether it's not turning the ball over at the 1 yard line or missing an easy field goal, they can't do that in this game if they're going to win. Death Valley's there. I think Jordan Travis has been lucky a few times. I remember the LSU game where he should have thrown 3 interceptions in the first half. That should have got away from him, but he was lucky because LSU don't know how to catch interceptions. I know he had one pass last week against Boston College he got lucky with that could have been picked off in the first half. That really could have changed that game early too, as far as made things more difficult for him. The penalties Boston College had definitely was the craziest thing I've ever seen. 18 penalties. I mean, Florida
And,
State lucked up
and
on
every
that.
last one of them was warranted too. That's the crazy part about it.
Every single one of them was warranted. Absolutely, they were, and that's what was crazy about it. And they still had a chance to win the game. And so it's not like Boston. My point being, it's not like Boston College played a great game.
No.
They didn't play out of their mind and almost beat Florida State. They actually played a horrible game and almost beat Florida State. There's a reason for that, and because of that, I think maybe some of that comes to fruition in this game against Clemson. I think it'll be tight most of the game, but I think Clemson gets a late score, sort of like they did a few years ago, or like they did last year. Kind of give them a lead that kind of makes it a little more comfortable at the end. The score is going to sound like Clemson dominates, but I'm not saying they are because I don't think it's going to be that way on either side. I'm going to say 31-17 is what I'm thinking. I like
Okay.
Clemson's defense in this matchup. I really do.
All right. I'm other liking. I think pretty much the same thing. FSU has a clean game in order to win this game against Clemson. Shouldn't make any turnovers. I think if they do that and play a clean game on both sides and get off the field on third downs,
Mm-hmm.
which has been a
Yeah.
major struggle for FSU. If they could dominate the first or second downs and make make Cade throw the ball in third and long situations. Hopefully they can get off the field and make some plays on that end. So I'm gonna go 34-24 FSU, and I think it's close. And FSU, like you said, on the flip end, scores a late touchdown to make it a 10-point lead.
Yeah.
Will, a pleasure, man. It's been a great conversation.
CJ, I enjoyed it, man. I love talking football with you, dude. That was fun.
Oh, most definitely. We're gonna have to get you back on pretty soon. Hopefully, if things play out, I think we could be seeing each other again in Charlotte.
If Clemson wins, I think we're going to. If
Most
Florida State
definitely.
wins, I don't think we will.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough now because the ACC is a lot better this year too, and with that early conference loss is going to be tough. But we'll see how
Yeah.
things play out for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Man, it's been fun, dude. Enjoyed it.
Likewise, Will. Take care, man. It's been a pleasure.
All right.
All right, guys. This was another episode of Dope Talk with the segment Behind Enemy Lines. We'll catch up with you guys on Sunday as we recap the game and go into the following week as a bye week. But we'll recap the game and have a live call to get you guys takes on the game. Go Noles.